John Diefenbaker said the Conservative caucus is like a cactus, except the pricks are on the inside.
Former leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Erin O'Toole, had some interesting advice for Pierre Poilievre, who is the current leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, during an episode of the Uncommons podcast, which is hosted by current Liberal MP Nate Erskine-Smith. Erin O'Toole right now is a private citizen, so since losing the election as the leader of the Conservative Party to Trudeau in 2021, he has gone. He left Parliament for to work in the private sector. But I'm going to play a few clips from this podcast because I find it just interesting to see how past leaders view how things are currently going, because we have seen, I think, clearly a shift towards the right from the Conservative Party in a way that wasn't as evident under at least Erin O'Toole. But this is the first question that is, or one of the questions that are posed to O'Toole during this podcast. This is about how Pierre Poilievre's office is maintaining a tight control over what Conservative MPs say and do. So this is a piece from CBC back on November 20th. But I'll get to more from this in a bit after the next clip. But one of the quotes here from a source within the Conservative Party: everybody is being watched. What we say, what we do, who we talk to. We're told not to fraternize with MPs from other parties, and that's not normal. So there are two clips on this. I'm going to get to the first one here, and then I'll get to the rest of Erin O'Toole's answer.
Poilievre's office is, I don't know if it's Jenny Byrne or whoever, but they're overseeing, making sure everyone's watched and they're, falling in line, and they're all axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime, don't say anything else, whether it rhymes or not, don't say anything else. And you didn't impose that discipline, and you suffered for it, and yet imposing that discipline is worse for our democracy. So how do you, reflect on all that and say, what's the right balance there?
Oh, thanks for dredging all that up, Nate. Well, what is interesting,
this is a therapy session at this point.
Did anybody notice that Nate, off the top of his head, recited the Conservative platform for the next election? Shows the impact of message discipline.
So I'll get to the rest of O'Toole's answer in a second here, but I want to note something, because it is not just these slogans. You could argue Pierre Poilievre, he wants to keep his caucus in line because he wants a certain message being put out there. It's also the fact that if you refuse, or not just that refuse, if you repeat the slogans, you get rewarded, and those who refuse to parrot the lines lose their speaking time. So there's these disincentives for not falling in line. But on top of that, to me, this part is worse. It's radio silence at the entrance to Conservative caucus meetings these days. Every Wednesday morning, journalists throw questions at the arriving MPs. Almost all of them pass without answering. Some avoid making eye contact with journalists. So these MPs are no longer even talking to the media because they're afraid that they may say something wrong. And this was apparently much different under O'Toole and Scheer, where many Conservative MPs stop by to chat with reporters every Wednesday. There is this, I'm sure some Conservative voters will think this is fantastic, right? Oh, don't talk to the media. But if you're a party or you're claiming to be about more transparency, this is the complete opposite of that. Making everybody shut their mouth and only having, the dear leader and Pierre Poilievre speak, I think this clearly leads to less transparency and just the inability for people to just have healthy disagreements about various issues. And I'll get to some clear examples of that later on. But here's the rest of O'Toole's answer.
John Diefenbaker said the Conservative caucus is like a cactus, except the pricks are on the inside. I kid. I love most of them. But it's historically been very, very difficult to manage the Conservative caucus. You could do the iron fist in the velvet glove, or the iron fist in the iron glove. But my leadership style didn't work. I'll be honest with you. It worked until COVID. And for the libertarian part of the movement, it was very, very hard to have an exertive state. I supported a lot of the public health measures. I think we should have actually been swifter at the border to try and keep, when we knew there was a pandemic, try and keep some of it out, cut the international flights quickly. But I didn't want us ever criticizing public health officials or premiers. So I had tons of times where I had Ontario Conservative MPs that wanted to do press conferences against Doug Ford. And I was stopping them saying, you know we're running against Justin Trudeau, right? And there are provincial cousins. So I said, put the country first. This is about getting through this health crisis. It's about pushing for vaccines faster. That seemed to work early on, but some of the fatigue from lockdowns, the isolation that we all know people in our families that it has impacted, and then some of the misinformation on health, whether it was ivermectin or all these things that popped up, as you probably all saw on your social media feeds. MPs felt they had to advocate for some of these things. And I always said, you're not a physician, you're somebody's constituency MP. Your responsibility is to help work with the officials to get us through.
All right. So what is interesting about the differences here is, Erin O'Toole, it almost sounds like he's kind of defending Pierre Poilievre's decision to kind of keep his MPs in line. But it's different because in O'Toole's situation, it's about listening to the experts, listening to, in the case he was running during the pandemic, listening to healthcare experts and not going out there and just, recommending things that weren't approved by anybody. In the case of Poilievre, the way he is running his caucus, it is actively damaging Conservative MPs' own constituents. So I'll get to a few examples, but as CBC writes here, Conservative Party staffers keep a close eye on MPs' activities, who's talking to reporters, who's deviating from the party line, who's fraternizing with MPs from other parties. Journalists have spotted party staffers taking notes, and sources say these activities are reported to the leader's office. So everything you do as a Conservative MP is tracked and watched and reported. Quote here from one of those sources: to be a good MP, it's important to build relationships with colleagues from other parties. That's how Parliament works best for Canadians, but the leader's office won't let us. So purposely keeping MPs away from other party members is bizarre and, more akin to something like an authoritarian regime than anything else. But these are clear examples of how this has actually led to damaging results for their own constituents here. So this month, 17 Conservative MPs who pleaded guilty with the government to ensure that cities in their ridings received their share of a federal housing fund were publicly rebuffed by the leader's office, and Poilievre actually forced those MPs to renege on their commitment to mayors in their ridings. So even though this would help people, he forced their MPs to renege on what they were trying to get because it would, in the mind of Poilievre, clearly would help the Liberals because you're signing on to something that the Liberals want to do. Which also goes to the recent passing of the pause on sales tax for a couple of months that the NDP signed on to, and that's why it was able to pass. Both Liberals and NDP passed it. But even though Conservatives, and I guess in this case really Poilievre, has been driving home the rhetoric around affordability and things are too expensive, even though this would help his constituents, even though this would help people in the country, at least for a couple of months. You can criticize that it doesn't go far enough or it isn't enough, whatever. But even though this would help people directly, he's against it. Now, to me, that just it showcases how full of crap the party is. Because if you're going to be hammering about the carbon tax, which, as I've discussed in other videos, really does not have much of an impact on anybody, at least, especially if compared to this pause on tax for a couple of months, which will save you more money than axing the carbon tax will. If you're so focused on axing a tax, why are you not for this one? It exposes that all of this is just about playing politics, which, anyone following this closely before, it was already clear. And to be clear, all parties play politics to an extent. But when this is your thing, axing a tax, and then you don't sign on with this one, it really exposes the BS at the heart of it. One of the biggest issues that I run into when researching a story is knowing if I'm getting the full picture. So having quick access to a variety of sources and their political leanings helps out quite a bit. That's why I use Ground News. So Ground News is an app and website that brings together related stories in one place to highlight important perspectives often overlooked in mainstream media. Every story comes with a visual breakdown of the political bias, reliability, and ownership, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. For example, when Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy were given the reins to reshape the US federal government, you can see how many sources covered it, along with their political leanings and the overall bias distribution, and then you can actually go and see how differently it was covered depending on the source. Right-wing outlet Breitbart called it the plan to drain the swamp, while left-leaning PBS NewsHour detailed the potential pitfalls. Go to ground.news/rationalnational or scan the QR code for 50% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. This is a limited time Black Friday sale. Another example, another Conservative MP said that, discussing the Quebec City Tramway project, that we won't start undoing contracts, we'll respect them. But a few hours later, he was forced to retract his statement after Poilievre told him to. So again, these are things that could potentially help people in these ridings. And it's all about keeping a steady line, keeping everybody in line, and regardless of how it may impact actual people, keeping everybody in line and on message, and really just playing politics as opposed to looking at politics as a vessel to actually help people. I want to get to the last clip here. This last clip to me is the most interesting one because this goes to, so the question asked to Erin O'Toole here is, name one negative thing about Pierre Poilievre. Again, O'Toole kind of sidesteps, but not really, because this is the, I guess you could say, the warning or the advice that he gives Poilievre.
I've said I don't like the F Trudeau flags. I don't like some of the polarization, and I've called my own side out on it. Pierre will have to be very careful with the base. And I agree with you. Pierre is very talented. You know, he's kind of grown up in politics. And he is the first politician in Canada that I think really understood how to get his message out through a range of channels. Trudeau was, very popular in 2015 on Facebook, but it was because he was well known before he was elected, right? Like guys like you and I and Pierre, no one knew us until you become an MP, and then you have to get known. Pierre was the first that was really able to harness social media from YouTube to everything else, and to develop an audience and to speak to it. Very, very crafty and intelligent. But that could also be a bit of a weakness because social media is not real life. It is curated, it is manipulated. And so, something that was huge years ago, like crypto, he had a huge following on crypto, crypto bros and all that sort of stuff. That goes down in a few years. And so sometimes building up that audience can make you think that the audience is a complete representation of the country. It is not.
So Erin O'Toole's warning to Pierre Poilievre there is be very careful with the base, especially how it applies to how the base is viewed online or what the base is online. And we'll get to the crypto example. I'm glad Erin O'Toole brought that up because that is a great example here. But so to be clear, I smushed 2 clips together. The first, 3 seconds there, where he talks about how he's against the F Trudeau flag. That was from earlier in the interview, but I thought it was worth mentioning because it kind of goes hand in hand here, where there is an extreme element of the Conservative base that may make one think that there are so many voters like this. And look, there are, unfortunately, there are a lot of them, but they are nowhere near the majority of people. Now, the issue, though, especially with this election, is that it's been 10 years of Trudeau, or I guess almost 10 years of Trudeau. People are just tired. This is what happened last time with Harper. Well, I think there were greater reasons to get him out. But it was, 10 years of Harper and people just wanted something different. Regardless of what Pierre Poilievre does over the next year, and the election will either be, early next spring or in the fall, regardless of what he does, we are leading towards almost a guaranteed Conservative victory, but it's either going to be a majority or a minority. And it's almost completely dependent on the fact that people are tired of the Liberals. It's not because they love Pierre Poilievre. If you look at the data, people are just like whatever about him. But people are just tired of Trudeau. They don't like Trudeau. That's what's driving a lot of this move towards the Conservative Party. I do wonder, moving up to the election, would people see more of Pierre Poilievre on a daily basis and actually pay more attention because there's an election coming up? Are they going to be turned off? Are they going to key into the fact that this guy has an entire career in Parliament fighting for massive corporations while now just applying or taking on rhetoric of the working class, which he has never cared about in his entire career? Are they going to catch on to that? I guess we'll have to wait. But I do think people's exhaustion of Trudeau and the Liberals is sort of going to overtake or potentially overtake that, which also goes to why it's important for Trudeau to step down and have a leadership contest within the Liberal Party. Even if they do that, I'm not, it doesn't guarantee the Liberals are going to win. But I think it could undercut the ability for Conservatives to win a clear majority. At the same time, the NDP as well. Jagmeet Singh is a nice guy, has done an okay job, I guess. But if the NDP hope to potentially gain in this situation, they need to have a leader who is more charismatic, who commands the camera better, who is I would say angrier would help as well. Show real anger from the working class, from a working class perspective, that Jagmeet Singh just doesn't, he's not that person. So if those two things happen, we could potentially avoid a majority government. But the way things currently are set up, we are marching towards a Conservative minority or maybe even more likely a majority. But quickly on just the stuff that was brought up there. This cryptocurrency, like this is a great example of how Pierre Poilievre, jumped onto something that the Conservative movement was all about, 2 years ago. So this is from, 2 years ago. In a pitch to cryptocurrency investors, Poilievre says he wants Canada to be blockchain capital of the world. Of course, crypto has since done quite poorly. Another example here from back then. Money printing deficits make our wages go up in smoke. We need sound money again. Sound money. And also the freedom for buyers and sellers to choose Bitcoin and other technology. This did not age well. Poilievre uses Bitcoin to buy delicious shawarma. So just full on pandering to the Conservative base, or I guess what he viewed as a large constituency. There's a lot of crypto bros on Twitter. I haven't encountered many in real life, but there's definitely a lot of that shit on Twitter, driven largely by bots. But that did not age well. And this article from this year from the National Observer, Pierre Poilievre bites his tongue on Bitcoin. Of course. So Erin O'Toole's warning, I think, is more towards he wants Poilievre to avoid any electoral defeat in that sense. That's what his warning is about. I worry more about the actual impact on the country if you listen too closely to a minority of extremists on the right. That's my worry, as opposed to what happens to Pierre and the Conservatives. But Erin O'Toole has been a recent victim of this insanity online. So Brian Lilley, who is a Conservative columnist for the Toronto Sun, tweeted out this tweet critical of these people in the military here who are marching. So he says here, as a 14-year-old in the Argyle Cadet Corps, I've marched better, had better training, and could perform drill better than this. Does drill matter? Anyone who has been in the military will tell you the answer. Yes, it serves a purpose. This is sad. So if you show me this video, I would have thought nothing. Now look, I haven't served, so maybe it really matters how hard you march. But to the average person, why do you care? Think back, 5-10 years ago, where we would see clips from North Korea of just the insane marches that they would have. Just thousands of people perfectly in sync. And we were all amazed by it, but not in a way where we were impressed. It was more just, this is wild. And knowing the underlying factors there, these people are afraid for their lives. It's not a good thing to be terrified so much that you have to march perfectly in sync for your country. It's just weird to me that this means anything to anybody at all. Anyways, Erin O'Toole came out to reply to Brian Lilley, criticizing him, saying, I want to applaud the people in this video. The bear marching is hard to watch, but each one of them stepped up to serve. Most voices on X have never done that. Drill proficiency can be easily improved with practice, but good character is increasingly very hard to find. So Erin O'Toole served in the Air Force. It's good to see he's willing to come out and criticize conservative voices. Brian Lilley is a massive conservative voice. So it's also easier for him now since he's a private citizen. But it's just, tweets like this is a lot of what the conservative base is, at least online. And the replies that Erin O'Toole got to this, completely unhinged. There's 1,000 replies, a lot of them completely insane. I'll just give you one example here. This account saying, and this is why you were ousted as leader. You were willing to accept mediocrity. You were liberal light. All of this over people marching in a video. A 10-second clip taken out of context. Who cares? Very weird to be so motivated by something like this. But this is where, it's one thing to try and give Pierre a warning here about don't get too far down the rabbit hole or pay attention to, don't pay too close attention to what you're seeing online. But we have to add the context here that Pierre Poilievre is a part of that. He's helped to create the bubble. It's not like he's just coming in as, a normal conservative MP. I mean, at this point, maybe you could argue he is, but that's only because the whole party has moved to the right at least partially because of him. This is not someone who's going to care. Like this is how he has been able to continue what he's been doing. He was able to win his leadership race by being as wild as he is, as conservative, or I should say as right-wing as he is. And since he's found success with that, he's not going to stop doing it until it begins to hurt him. And in this situation that we are in the current political climate, it's really not going to matter all that much what he does, because again, a lot of the support for the Conservative Party right now is simply an anti-liberal vote, which goes again. Liberals, NDP, get your crap together, or we're going to clearly face a conservative government next election.